If someone asks you to think of a Sega character, chances are your first thought will be Sonic the Hedgehog. But before Sonic became the face of Sega, we had Alex Kidd. And before Alex Kidd we had Opa Opa from Fantasy Zone, but I digress. Known for his large ears, impressive sideburns and red jumpsuit, there's a reason some people think he slightly resembles a monkey. And they'd be right. His appearance is predominantly based on the character of Sun Wukong from the Chinese folktale Journey to the West. The same inspiration that Akira Toriyama drew from to create Dragon Ball. I think he kinda looks like the 70s footballer George Best myself. Alex Kidd's popularity peaked in the late 80s and he starred in several of his own games, mostly in arcades and on the Master System. Despite his popularity, Sega felt that he just wasn't a strong enough mascot to rival Nintendo, who of course had Mario, so Sonic was introduced in 1991.
絶好調のメガソフトアレックス・キッドのミラクルワールドアレックが繰り広げるスリルとサスペンスの大冒険超ウルトラアドベンチャーゲームアレックス・キッドのミラクルワールド
Released in 1986, Alex Kidd in Miracle World was originally released as a cartridge, but was later built into some Master System consoles, before later being replaced by a built-in version of Sonic. It might seem novel nowadays, but having a game built into your console was quite amazing back in the day. One of the changes that came with some of the later releases of the game was replacing Alex's rice ball with a burger, a practice that still happens today in some games and anime, especially Pokemon. Another change was to swap the functions of buttons 1 and 2 around. In the game, we're told that Alex is an orphan who lives alone on Mount Eternal on planet Ares, aka Miracle World, where he is trained in the Shellcore technique. This technique enables you to alter the size and toughness of your fists through sheer willpower alone, which lets you do cool things like, you know, smash rocks with your bare hands and take out enemies with just one punch. You could say Alex Kidd was the original One Punch Man. The planet is thrown into chaos after the disappearance of King Sander Redaxian, or, as he's referred to in the manual, King Thunder. As if that wasn't bad enough, Janken the Great comes along and kidnaps Prince Eagle and his fiancée, Princess Laura. After discovering that he's actually a lost member of the Redaxian family, the son of the king no less, Alex Kidd steps in to save the day. As you can see, the graphics are pretty good, especially for a Master System game. It's all crisp and clear and just generally nice to look at. The music's fun too, if a little repetitive. As for the gameplay, honestly it can be pretty harsh. We have one-hit kills, cheap deaths, the hit detection is awful at times, especially in the castle stages. There are some nasty platform challenges that require a touch of precision, not easy when the controls are slippery. At times I felt like I was playing Alex Kidd on ice. Keep in mind the Master System controller isn't the most forgiving controllers either. The boss fights take the form of having to win 2 games of rock, paper, scissors, or jankin as the game refers to it. And yes, these bosses do have hands for heads. What do you expect? In the English version of the manual, they're called Stonehead, Paperhead and Scissorhead. They're all members of Janken the Great's crew, Gooseka the Slippery, Chakina the Sly, and Parplin the Pursuer. Rock Paper Scissors is a cool idea and definitely sets the game apart from what else was out at the time. Though, with the game consisting of 17 levels, it can get old. Can you imagine getting through a level, bearing in mind the game has no save feature, only to be beaten and sent back to the start of the game just because you chose the wrong shape to make with your hand? This means that the boss fights rely purely on your own luck and memory, but there is a hidden item that allows you to read the mind of your opponent, so it's definitely worth looking out for that if you're planning to play through the game by yourself. Be warned though, these enemies will still try and trick you, so a bit of luck is still required. My advice if you want to play through the game is to use a handy game FAQ. Don't worry, I won't tell anyone. Normally, I hate water levels, but the water level in this game is actually okay. The water doesn't slow you down, and you don't have to worry about running out of air. Instead, you can focus your attention on more important things, like frog monsters. Some levels allow you to make use of vehicles, like a motorbike or a rotocopter. These are a lot of fun and a good addition to the game. With so many levels, it's cool to have things like this to keep the game fresh. However, if you touch any of the red balls on the level or the roof of your vehicle hits a wall, you're instantly thrown off to walk the rest of the way. It's a fun game overall, though it does sometimes feel like it's constantly trying to take things away from you. Nowhere is this more evident than with the game's final boss. Not only do you have to defeat the boss, but afterwards there is a pattern on the floor that you have to work out and memorise. And even then, you can still impale yourself on the spikes before getting to the treasure chest, and that means you have to go through the whole pattern again. If you collect the right items through your gameplay, you can actually have the pattern shown to you though, but if you miss them, like I managed to, then good luck. Before I move on to the next game, I should point out that with the exception of Alex Kidd in the Enchanted Castle, which I'll cover in my next A to Z of Mega Drive episode, the Alex Kidd games are all hugely different from each other. They're mostly all platformers, but apart from Alex Kidd himself, there's not much that actually ties the games together.
Find the miracle ball.
アレクの新しい冒険物語。数ある難関をクリアして12の星座に光を灯せ。アレックス・キッドザ・ロストスターズ。 Sega!
Find the miracle ball.
The next game to be released was Alex Kidd The Lost Stars, appearing first in the arcades, then later ported to the Master System. For the purposes of this retrospective, I'll be mainly focusing on the Master System game. This game sees Alex searching for the 12 zodiac signs, aka the Lost Stars, after discovering they've been stolen from planet Ares by Ziggurat. You've probably already noticed that the graphics are nowhere near as crisp as in Miracle World, but what it lacks in crispness, it makes up for in bright colourfulness. It's also not going to compare to arcade quality graphics, but I think it's a good port considering it's running on 8-bit hardware. In terms of gameplay, it's much easier than Miracle World and more forgiving, with endless continues. This is where the console version differs from the arcade version, where you only have 3 lives. The arcade version also allowed for cooperative play, with one player being able to play as Stella, who may or may not be Alex's girlfriend. She's a cool looking character and it's a shame she wasn't used more. With that said, they did manage to squeeze in some moments where it's impossible not to die. Plus, this time around, Alex can't punch any enemies. I can only assume his knuckles were too bruised from the last game. Anyways, you collect the first 6 zodiac signs and go into space to fight Ziggurat. And then, you go through all the levels again, this time with slightly more enemies. Luckily the levels are fun and creative enough to stop this from being as boring as it probably should be. There's a toyland where all the toys seem intent on killing you, a robotics factory, a prehistoric area, and of course, this means we get to take a second trip into space. One of my favourite levels involves you making great use of the low gravity in the planet you've landed on. Whee! Speaking of enemies, if you thought Miracle World was wacky with its hands for head bosses, things get even weirder in this game. The first boss you encounter is a disembodied bearhead that shoots musical notes at you. A couple of levels later, there's some sort of naked punk baby shooting skulls at you from his bum. Then of course, there's the baby heads that roll at you from out of nowhere. Creepy stuff. One issue that needs to be addressed is what happens when you die. Whether you get hit, fall, or just run out of time, Alex lets loose one of the most grating sounds to ever have graced a video game. Lost Stars is a fun game overall, though it could have been better. I'd like to have seen Alex's vehicles from Miracle World make an appearance. We could even have had some sort of spaceship for those space levels. I do like it though that they took the time to include Opa Opa from the Fantasy Zone series as a little Easter egg. So, after battling through all those worlds twice, I was hoping for a better ending to the game than this as well. Hey everybody, hope you enjoyed part 1 of the history of Alex Kidd. Stay tuned for part 2 coming soon. And if you like what you see, don't forget to subscribe. Cheers!